Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Register webinar series. I'm joined here with Dale from Freeform and Paul from HPE, and we've got a number of unanswered questions to ask you. I mean, unanswered questions are part of our history. They go way back. Yeah, what caused the Big Bang? Who killed John F. Kennedy? And of course, why are we all talking about digital so much, and particularly with the digital workforce, which is the kind of untapped area that digital is still in many organisations trying to reach. In order to answer at least one of those questions, we're going to be speaking to Paul Evans of Hewlett-Packard. So Paul, what do you do? Here's another unanswered question. What do you do for HP?
What do I do for HP? I suppose basically work with clients on how they can make the most of this whole digital thing that's going on, whether it's transformation or revolution, whichever way you want to put it. I think what we are trying to do is help clients and large organizations really make the most of it and do it in the most effective, efficient and prosperous way.
And they are talking about it.
Oh, there's no lack of conversation. I think everyone knows about digital at the moment. The big question is, is seeing through all the sort of the fashionable statements and getting down to the real facts of the matter of what's going on.
And speaking of fashionable statements and facts of the matter of what's going on, this isn't the first time that we've gone through periods of buzzwords and excitement about topics, is it, Dale?
No. Digital's, I've sat here on many occasions, as you know, whether it's cloud or SOA or go back far enough, all these things. Digital is quite interesting. I'd be interested in you elaborating on your view of digital, actually, Paul, a little bit later on. But it's interesting. We've done a lot of research recently looking at digital transformation, which is one of those phrases that everyone knows the phrase, but no one actually knows what it means necessarily, because it's all very dependent on your business. But what's interesting is we hear a lot of IT vendors talking about digital transformation in the context of engaging with customers. So digital marketing, marketing automation, that kind of stuff. But actually, when we go and talk to senior IT guys and senior business people, a lot of the time, that digital stuff with customers has been going on for a long time. There's not a lot that's hugely new in terms of fundamentals there. But what they are really interested in and what they tend to gravitate towards is what's going on in the workforce and how do we enable our people, and you just get smarter about how the way we work internally. So it's a pretty big deal that comes up all the time for us.
Computer says no, Paul, isn't that what? Shouldn't we just give people computers and let them be on with it in the workforce?
No, I think treating your workforce as if they're a bunch of lemmings is probably like the worst thing you can do. I think what has really come about, since we started to use these sort of things, I think it has opened our eyes to the possibilities of what you can actually do. And I think the challenge is, for someone with a large workforce, is in the evenings and weekends, we go home and we sit on whatever device we prefer and we do whatever it is with whichever application we want to do it with, and we enjoy it and we're highly effective and highly productive. And then there is a feeling when we come back to the office sometimes, that you sit down and people look at an environment that says, this is not like I have at home. This is not what I'm used to. And what I'd like is the same. I'd like apps that are intuitive, that are friendly, that are helpful. I'd like an environment that is flexible, that I can connect as and when I want to connect, where I want to connect. I don't need to be chained to a 6 foot by 6 foot cube with a LAN, hardwired network. And I think that's one of the driving forces that's been going on, is this dichotomy between the work environment and the home environment has sort of taught people the art of what's possible. So what they want to do now is, why can't I do it at home? And the way I do it at home, why can't I do it in the workplace?
I've got a question there, because a lot of are we still coming out of the downturn? I'm not sure, but there's been a lot of emphasis on efficiency in the workplace and just saving money, removing staff in some cases, automation, etc., etc. A lot of the things you're talking about there are about enablement, empowerment. When you speak to customers, how much are you actually seeing these topics? How much are they caring about their workforce, and how much are they seeing it more as just ways of getting more out of them?
Oh, I think there's always a view that says you want to, if you're a workforce or an investment, then you want to get a good return on that investment. That's a good business thing to do. But I think the point being is that people are actually seeing, and we've done our own research that proves that if you can begin to give people an environment that is very mobile, very flexible, very agile, then actually what you start to do is actually empower people. You actually get people enjoying what they do. And not only that, is that they actually become more productive. And overall then, you get an environment where people start to feel more loyalty to their employer. So it's an upward cycle. So you've got people that are motivated, that are excited, that come into work in the mornings and do what they want to do. And you're getting more from them and they're enjoying it and they contribute more. So I think that's really what this is all about.
And that comes back to the question of why digital, therefore, and so it really does matter. It's not mattering just simply to save money, but it's mattering to get the better people in to improve the environment that they're working in.
The thing about digital, I think, that is so different. I mean, a lot of people say to me, why is it different now? Computers have been digital since whenever. So why now? And I think the point being is, if you look at mobility. We have unheralded mobility compared to what we've had in the past. And the ability to directly communicate to people, whether that be employees or customers or whatever, has never been this good. You can send a message to somebody that tells them something. Your package is going to get delivered at 12 today, and the driver's name is Gavin, and this is the registration number of the vehicle. We've never been there before. I think the point being is that the ability to tap into what is virtually seen as a free infrastructure in terms of cloud services, the ability through social networking to get feedback from people that we've never had before, that we had to sort of pay people to give. All of these things have all come together at a moment in time that says, wow, look at what we can do now, how this could be quite enjoyable if we want it to be.
I think, Dale, it's an untapped opportunity, or it's a tappable opportunity. Let's say, I mean, from the research perspective, are organisations buying this? Are they wanting to kind of take advantage of digital stuff, or are they kind of reticent?
Let me take a step back.
How deep are the heels in there?
There was a slide earlier on that we skipped over quite quickly. I missed it actually, but don't bother to try and go back. But I would like to just reframe this a little bit, because we spent a lot of time a few years ago, probably only a couple of years ago, and we all remember the peak of the BYOD hype. The answer to everyone's productivity problems, workforce efficiency, staff turnover and everything else was to either give everyone an iPhone or let them bring their own iPhone to work. And that was it. And we were just purely focused on devices. And I went to vendor briefing after vendor briefing as an analyst, and you could guarantee the first 3 or 4 slides were all about BYOD, and some went to the extent of saying the IT department was going to be made redundant, and et cetera, and users were going to rule everything. But we were only talking about devices, largely speaking. So we just got obsessed with the bling, with the edge piece. And
it's nice bling.
It's nice bling. I agree though with what Paul was saying. We've all got these things now. We've all had them for quite a while. We're kind of used to them. We take certain things for granted from a consumer perspective, and I was kind of feeling as if we were getting to a point where we could now start having a more grown-up decision, which is not so much how great these devices are and how good they make us feel, but how can we actually bring them to bear to solve business problems and actually drive some productivity. And I think that's really important. One of the things that we do find is that the pendulum has swung in lots of customers that we consult with, who they get into conflict between the IT department and users. The pendulum is swung arguably too much towards users being empowered to make technology decisions. Now, we want users to be empowered to do their jobs, but we do not want them to define our IT strategy. So one of the things I think is really important when we talk about the digital workplace is at last we're starting to step back and say, well, let's take a little bit more of a joined up view about it. Yes, we want to empower employees, but we also want to drive some business benefits, and we also want to make sure that IT isn't crippled into the bargain. So these are...
And it's not just mobile devices, it's WhatsApp on phones and wherever else, it's Dropbox, it's data sharing
It is, yeah.
Well, I think it's far more as Dale said, I think the device there was a period where it was all about fashion. But I think now it's becoming a software-defined world, which means the apps are really taking hold of as it were, the way that we deliver an experience. And not only the experience we get on the device, but what happens across the network and what happens beyond the network. I know most users don't care what happens beyond their device, as long as the result turns up here. We as users just say, if I want to know, is the train running on time? I just want to, that's what I want to know. How that is achieved, I don't care. The point being is the IT department has the job of, well, we're the guys who have to figure out the automation and orchestration of those 10 systems that delivers the result to your phone in a sensible amount of time. That's tricky stuff to do, but it's necessary. And I think we are now getting a more balanced discussion where users are beginning to realise some of this stuff is quite complicated.
And it's interesting. This slide is quite a good one, the one we're looking at here, because a lot of organisations. Well, think about it for a minute. As consumers, we consume a lot of stuff, right? And we have a great digital experience, and who's actually delivering that experience to us? It's a lot of the big brands, obviously the service providers like Facebook and Amazon and so on. But anyone who's got a big consumer-facing brand has probably invested quite a bit, as we've shown on this slide, in delivering a good consumer experience to us. And I think all we're saying with a lot of this stuff is we should be doing the same for our people internally. And that's the big disjoint. It's that. And a lot of this is about the perspective you look from. If I look as a consumer, it's great that everyone I trade with and buy from and supports me has invested in digital engagement with me as a consumer. But actually, when I turn up to work and I now have to battle with fragmented systems, and yes, I can get to some things, but it's not very elegant, and from a productivity point of view, that's not very good, and it's not very pleasant, and I think that's where we're starting from. So it's basically catching up, it's redressing that imbalance, I think.
The apps come with manuals, which of course is not what we get with these. The biggest difference, no, but the biggest difference is, when you get a new app on your phone, you just figure it out, because the way it's been designed has been designed so that a human's going to use it. How many times we've been working within our work environment where you have to go on a training course to use an application?
Well, I think
something different there.
The app's been designed. There's an awful lot of apps out there that we don't use because they're very, very similar to the ones we do, but they're just less usable. So it's a kind of Darwinian approach to apps, isn't it? The ones that have bubbled to the surface are the ones that we actually find easier to use.
Yeah, and if you think about it from an employee point of view as well, I mean, you're sitting there and you've got an app for your CRM system, you've got another app for your ERP system, you've got another app for your expense management, another app for this. And so if you do have apps, none of them work together particularly well. And if you're sitting in front of a customer, for instance, and you want to do a little bit of looking up some history, checking some inventory, whatever it happens to be, most organisations struggle, or most employees sitting in front of customers struggle to do that, whether it's in a call centre context or whether it's in a sort of face-to-face context.
I was going to say that I was going to say something which isn't relevant yet, so I'll jump onto this one. What we could be saying about this is aren't we just being too nice to people? It's just
When you say people, who define people?
Well, I'm going to take the cynic's view. All right, so the business is all about making money. We want to just get the right results to the right people. We want to squeeze the best we possibly can, and so we'll give them some tools, and we'll give them the right tools, and we'll make that experience better. And productivity is the real criterion that matters here. Is that all it's about, really, just improving productivity?
Well, I actually think that people, if we're talking about the workforce, I think people now, it's not just about ROI and shareholder value. I think people want to work for organizations that they believe are making a statement, making a difference. And that's not just about financials. Financials are obviously extremely important. They have to be, because that drives investment, which means you move forward. But I think a lot of people, especially, you might say the younger generations, like Dale and I, we're basically, they want to work for an organization that is doing something special, different, making a contribution. And that is beyond, I think, the financial goals of an organization. And I think that's what a lot of people get driven by, is excellence. I want to do a great job using great technology to make a difference and move this thing forward. And that is on top of the fact, yeah, we're gonna do well financially, but it's delivering something that is memorable. I think a lot of organisations are interested in.
So we're going to come on to talking about how we do some of this stuff and what it translates to in terms of some of the investments we need to make. What I would say though is that people didn't invest in customer engagement systems, that stuff on the right hand side of the set of scales we were looking at a minute ago, just to make customers feel good. A lot of this marketing automation stuff costs an awful lot of money to put in and an awful lot of money to run. And the way the business case was made was on things like reduced churn, increased cross-selling and upselling, lifetime value of customers, customer profitability, etc., etc. So there are lots of really hard-nosed, hardcore business reasons for actually making customers feel good. And I guess the BYO thing, I think for me, was unfortunate because we did talk far too much about making employees feel good. And I'm not saying that's not important, but that's not the business reason for doing it. The business reason is to actually drive better results. And that's some of the things we see on this chart, for instance. This is actually from Reg Readers, and this is, we were talking a little while ago with them through a survey about creating a flexible environment, the kind of environment we've been talking about, making it nice for users, but why would you do that? And well, you can see, I won't sort of read them all out, but it ranges from productivity through to, at the bottom there, but they're all pretty significant, innovation, because if you connect people up and you allow them to exchange ideas and information and just work a lot more seamlessly, they tend to come up with better ideas and they tend to be able to act on ideas a lot better. And that might not be world-changing, what's our next product going to be. It might be, if we can just cut out this step in this process, suddenly we can turn a customer request around in half a day, not a day. Now, whether you call that innovation, I don't know, but this is the kind of thing that happens when people are collaborating and communicating a bit more effectively. So it's those kind of goals and objectives that we see here.
How much emphasis do you think we should be putting on innovation? As it, McKinsey-esque kind of phrasing is innovate or die kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a bit like, how much time to inspire about breathing, I think. I mean, innovating, I think, is absolutely fundamental because, unfortunately, whether we're inside the firewall as employees or whether we're customers outside the firewall, innovation is something that we want. We want to see the fact that today I can do this on this device and tomorrow I can do something else. And then the day after I can do something else. If we're an employee, we're similarly like the same way, which is I want to see the company moving forward. I want to see it making a statement, delivering things. So I think innovation is like breathing. It's just a question of how easy is it to do within your organization. Does the organization stifle innovation? And it's like, well, you're not the right person to be innovating. It's like, well, why am I not the right person to be innovating? Well, it's because you're not in the right place in the organization. I think everyone should be allowed to innovate and collaborate and share ideas. And I think that's what digital technology allows us to do is this ability to collaborate. It's far easier. These things don't understand hierarchy. I can send a WhatsApp to whoever I want to. I can send a message to whoever I want to and say, I've got an idea. And that, I think, is one of the joys and one of the ways we really like
this is what I think. This is what organisations really struggle with. Though you should be hard-nosed about it. It is possible to be hard-nosed about it, but just how to be hard-nosed about it is really, really hard.
But I spent a lot of time working with people on business cases and stuff for all kinds of investments over the years, and you know the way it goes. There are things that you put on the business case that justify those amount of pounds or dollars or whatever being allocated to that particular project. You always have to do that because at some point someone's going to take a spreadsheet and say, do these numbers add up? But quite often that's not the real reason you're doing it. You're doing it to drive intangible values, things that are difficult to measure, but you know that if you do address them, they're going to unlock a whole bunch of potential, new ways of working, and you know it's going to be good, you just don't know quite how good it's going to be. But you still justify based on the tangible stuff, and that's what actually gets the project.
It's the ROI,
gets it through. But that, and that's not trivial either. I mean, those tangible benefits, those immediate benefits, are actually quite important. But to address your question on innovation, John, I think we shouldn't run away with the fact that innovation always has to be big and transformational. And some of the best companies, and we find a big correlation when you look at how well companies do in our research. Whether you measure it by KPIs that they declare themselves or their stock price even, and the degree to which they have a culture of continuous innovation or continuous improvement, let's say. So this is like every day you're doing a few things differently just to move things forward. That's not a massive upheaval. It's not to say that you don't need massive upheavals and massive transformations every now and again to shake the market up or react to a market shift or whatever. But actually that continuous approach is really important. Now that becomes a lot easier if you digitally enabled, to use the marketing speak, a lot of your workforce. And for one thing, when people are directly interacting with systems as opposed to using bits of paper and picking up the phone and shifting things from in tray to in tray, you've got visibility. And as soon as you can see what's going on, you can see how it can be improved. And that may be down to innovation, it might be down to efficiency, it could be anything. But this is why it matters.
And I think that maybe brings it back to the question of why are we talking about it now, which I know we talked about that particular question a lot before we came into this room. Back in the day, road warriors were, sure, you give them mobile phones almost immediately, sure, you give them internet access to CRM systems, etc., and they're the obvious targets, and that was a kind of digital enablement. But now so what has changed, do you think, Paul, in terms of the way we're thinking about it now compared to just giving mobile phone to a sales guy?
Well, I think giving people devices, giving them apps, etc., I think is part of the, I hate to use the word, journey that people are on. But I think that the big difference is now, and it's back to what Dale was saying, is it's now beginning to have a fundamental effect on the processes that organizations use to get things done. And people are starting to question and say, you know what, we could improve the process and the way we actually do things within the organization. And that this time around, it's actually, technology and business process have been in this lockstep march. And there are times when you feel technology has been a bit ahead and the process is behind. And then you get a feeling that the process has sort of jumped over that and technology has been trying to catch up. And if you're a CIO, you've probably felt for the last 10 years that you've just been trying to catch up to where a line of business manager has said, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to come in the morning and see what was sold yesterday, by region, by store, by what postcode, whatever it may be, and I can see what's going on with my business. And people have struggled to do that. It's like, well, why should this be so difficult? But they've been trying to do those things. I think what digital has now done is given technology, you might say, it's sort of leaped forward, but it's not just leaped forward, it's gone a long way forward. And now we as consumers or employees, we sort of like this. I don't believe there's ever been a period where employees have enjoyed technology so much. Whether you love or hate these things, just look around anywhere today, whether it's a train station or an airport, whatever. What do people do the most?
They're all like this.
They're all on their phones. And that says, they may not like it, but they like the results they get. They like the ability that they're always on, that they can communicate with who they want to communicate with, that they can check on things. Is my train on time? Is it late? Is it this? Is it that? Did that package get delivered? Whatever it may be. So the point being is that digital technology is really giving people an opportunity now to really take a big step forward. But that requires us now to look at our business processes, which are not the most exciting things in the world, and say, how would digital affect those? And how could we manipulate those processes to really exploit to the full the technology? And there's a huge amount of work to be done in that space, which is this whole notion of technology and business sitting down with each other and saying, how are we going to make the most of this?
I think we're going to need some triangles to explain some of this, Paul.
Triangles are always good.
So to summarise then, yes, there's a wealth of opportunity. It's more about enablement than transformation, I think was something you were saying there.
It's both. It
both.
Depends on the context.
I think you flip between the two. You want to enable something. In order to enable it, you've got to transform something.
Here's a good way of thinking about it. When you're properly enabled and things are ticking along really smoothly, you're making money. When you're transforming, usually you're not making money. You're taking time out to transform. Now, you get all these analogies about, let's re-engineer the jumbo jet in mid-flight and so on. But largely speaking, transformation interrupts the flow of business, whether you like it or not. So the good companies do that infrequently, and they do it proactively as well. So both are important. And the worst thing you can do is just let things. I think this is an analogy you used a few years ago, actually, John. You stretch a piece of elastic, and you don't invest, and you make do, and you make do, and you make do, and you make do, and then suddenly the elastic breaks, and that may manifest itself as a competitor has now done something in a totally different way that's put you on the back foot, or a system is just not able to keep up with the pace of change or whatever. And now you're having to transform reactively, and that's a really bad place to be.
Right, on the back foot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think there's another word. I think you used enablement and transformation. The other word is disruption. Whether we like it or not, digital also has the ability to be, a disruptive force. The things that used to restrict people, breaking into a new market, which was investment and people and capital, and I need a data center, I need big buildings, are gone. I can now as I said, I can now communicate with 1 billion people for free. I can now sign up for a data center environment with a credit card. I can now get feedback from my customers and my employees over a social network that can shape my offering going forward. All of these things I can do, and I can become disruptive. I can take on a large brand and disrupt them. I can force them to do things. I mean, we see all the time, whether it's in the financial services industry or the insurance industry or whatever it may be, is organizations being disruptive. When Amazon came into being, that was a disruptive force. We've seen a lot of retailers, let's say in the UK, who have gone out of business because you probably say they did not respond well to disruption. And unfortunately, this disruption can be anywhere. And as Dale was saying, you either have got to say, right, I'll use it to force myself and my organization to do something and to respond and move ahead. Doesn't mean I have to disrupt somebody else. I can just use it as a weapon and as a vehicle to move forward and become innovative.
So the worst thing you can do is try and avoid it.
Oh, I don't think there's any way you can avoid. I mean, I'll say, I don't think there's any way you can avoid digital. You might be able to put it off, but you can't avoid it forever. It's going to get you. I mean, the sort of industries we're working with inside HPE, it's across the board. It's not just financial services or just transportation. Every industry is wanting to understand how could this improve what we do, either for our employees or for our customers or for both. Everyone. That no one gets to opt out of this.
So at the risk of going into buzzword overdrive, I wrote an article recently called Digital Disruptors Do It to Themselves. And it really came up. We did a big global study.
Sisters do it for themselves, I think.
Yeah, I was riffing off the track there. But we did a big global study on digital transformation, for want of a better word. But we broke it down into its constituent parts. And what we found is that the organisations that were getting the best results from just applying technology to do new and different things were putting an equal emphasis on internal versus externally facing stuff.
Right.
And they were in a minority, probably about 1 in 8.
That's back to the scales.
Back to the scales, yeah. But I think that's an important thing just to bear in mind, that the disruption idea is important, but you do need to be internally facing as well as externally facing when you do that. So I'm trying to bring it back to the workplace thing. There, by the way, I think this slide is before we just move on to our. I know we've got a triangle coming, John, which you're itching to get onto.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I just think it's important. I mean, I've been tracking the mobile industry since 2001, 2002, something like that, and some of the absolute best business cases were around field service, logistics, some of those things at the bottom, for just handheld devices. This is kind of things that you would go out, your delivery guys, your service engineers or whatever, they'd do a day's work, they'd come back, assuming the battery would live that long, they'd drop it in the cradle and it would sync back to the mothership and away you go. And then we had GPRS, 2G, 2.5G, wasn't it, connectivity. And that was great, because suddenly these things could trickle things backwards and forwards, job information over the course of a day. And with every wave of this stuff, we've seen the business case get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think the big thing now is connectivity is almost a given in many respects. And I know one of my colleagues at least will say, hold on, but you can't get a 3G signal anywhere. But generally speaking, you can assume a lot more in the way of connectivity.
It's become an expectation.
Now. Yeah. So at least you've got intermittent connectivity throughout the day for most people. It just opens so many doors. If you then put that against the backdrop of being able to connect things behind the scenes much better, then that opens even more doors, and we'll come on to that in a second. But we should look at your triangle.
Well, interestingly, we've got a question in. We've got two questions, a two-part question, all of which is, so I thank Marcus out there for the segue to the next section, which is, what would you recommend? Marcus asks, but he goes more specific than that. He says, I think it's very difficult to embark on this kind of discussion with the senior management, and I don't see that discussion being driven by IT. So let's take that and let's move from the why are we all talking about digital to how, what can we do about it, and then how can we go about that?
That's a really good question, actually.
And my God, does this involve triangles? Yeah. So here's a triangle. It's got information technology at the bottom, it's got business operations in the middle, and it's got business models at the top. And I'm going to hand straight over to you, Paul, to run us through.
Go for it, Paul.
Well, I think to Marcus's question, first of all, I don't know of a case where a significant digital transformation has been pushed through without senior management involvement. I think that's the point. The senior management have to be involved. They have to want to do this. They have to see the need to do this. Because if not, then one, if they don't support it, there'll come a time when you need their support and they won't give it, and then you're in trouble. Secondly, by having that support, if you're, I suppose you say, manipulative, you can use that support to get things done. And that, I think, is absolutely important. But of course, you've got to make the case. Not every senior manager is walking around saying, I need to digitally transform. Although I think they're all probably scratching their heads and thinking, what does it mean to me? And really, there are like 3 layers you can play the game, as it were. Now, I think every organisation we talk to is doing something around, you might say, the fundamental infrastructure. Now, that may be just piece part transformation, or it can be people that are looking to really transform themselves in terms of, we're going to be totally Wi-Fi. We're going to get rid of all the cables. The cables are coming out of the buildings. The phones are going away. We're going to be using, voice over IP and things like Skype for Business, etc. So most organizations are embarked on some form of, transformation of their infrastructure, which we believe is just breathing. You have to do that these days. The point being is that me as a customer or me as an employee may actually not notice that. The fact that, whether it's, HPE or Amazon or Google, whatever, upgrade all their server environments, would I notice? Maybe not. So the point being is you can do all this investment, and yet as a client, it's like, so what? The point being is go back to Marcus's point, what the senior management have to concern themselves is that the other 2 parts of the triangle, which is, it doesn't happen very often, where people really look at their business model and say, you know what, we could do something different, better, whatever it may be. The poster childs of those are people like Uber and Airbnb, organizations that came out of nowhere, invariably have no asset base. So therefore they are incredibly flexible and agile because they don't have an asset base to consider, and yet can actually come in and disrupt. So, Airbnb comes in and disrupts the hotel industry massively, because all of a sudden now they could offer you any sort of property in any sort of location at very competitive prices, and yet they've got no assets to consider. Whereas the guys who've built the massive, as it were, hotel chains, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, etc., have to have a different set of things to worry about. So the point being is, there are opportunities for organizations to do that, but they don't come up every day of the week. The thing that is coming up every day of the week that people have to look at is how they re-engineer those business processes to exploit digital. Because if you just put digital onto an old process, it's a bit like you just may make it go wrong faster. What you want to do is to go down the right road faster. And therefore, the whole notion of what does it mean to the process? What could we give our customers that they don't get today that they would value. So the fact that, I get a message from my courier service telling me when the parcel's going to turn up and who's going to be driving the van and what's the registration number, so that I can feel secure that if my wife opens the front door, it's not, she won't get a surprise, as it were. So the point being is, the fact that I don't have to stay in all day waiting for that package is a real benefit to me. And that requires a change in process.
I think one of the issues is that if you do see it from an IT-centric point of view, you kind of see the rollout as the end of the rollout as you're done, you finished, and you're all proud of that achievement. But actually, that hasn't changed anything. That's just got people to...
And it's also, as Dale said, it's continuous. Someone said to me, that a lot of the companies today are, people telling me, we refresh our mobile app every 28 days. You talk to a lot of other organisations that refresh every day, if not twice a day. So it's a different game. But the point being is, it's not just refreshing for refreshing's sake. It's the fact that you want to continuously improve the experience.
That's just refilling the glass.
Yeah, and therefore the whole business operations side has got to become in lockstep with digital. And that's why you need senior management on board, because you can't fiddle with business operations if you don't have senior management involved. IT can fiddle all they want, as it were, with the infrastructure and improve it, make it faster and cheaper and better. But the point being is, if you're still not deploying the right process, you're not going to get to where you want to be.
So can IT drive this stuff, Dad? Are IT driving this stuff?
We've got a slide coming in a sec. Stay on this one for a minute, but we've got a slide coming in a sec which will directly address that. So I won't answer it right now because it's not a simple answer. But what I would say on this chart, now, let's put people to one side for a minute, and that's only just to illustrate a big shift which I think is going on. In that traditionally, when you look at the way businesses were run, they would define some aspirations, they would define a strategy, they would then say, okay, what do we need in terms of an operating model, and that in turn would define the business operations layer in our diagram here, and then ultimately they get to, okay, so what IT do we need to support all of that stuff? So very much a sort of top-down driven approach, and that's big industry leaders have always kind of viewed the world in that way. That's kind of industrialized thinking. But I do think this is kind of being turned on its head quite a bit. So I think we need to get away from thinking about IT, because IT has got connotations of the IT department, our IT infrastructure, etc., and think about technology in a much broader sense. Because if you just switch out, get rid of the information piece so it becomes just technology at the bottom layer, I think technology developments are now starting to push upwards, and it may even be the case that a technology appears in the marketplace, consumers leap onto it straight away, and we've seen lots of examples of this, and suddenly it opens the door to a new business model. Now, you may not even know how you're going to address that from an operational model and business operations point of view. You just know that when your competitors has just done that, and it may be, if you're in the courier industry, it may be as simple as customer notifications and those kind of things. But that's a technology-driven change. But you couldn't do it 5 years ago. You can do it now. And,
reality check, though. I mean, when we say information technology, whatever, it's 25 data centers, it's 400 databases, it's 8,000 servers, it's trying to get it to work with the cloud stuff, it's complex, it's falling apart, it's just to say, you should stop thinking about that stuff.
No, I wouldn't say stop thinking about it. I was saying, what are the bits that make a difference? Because there's a whole load of stuff that you have to do, but then there are one or two things that shift things over a line. So IoT is a good example. What's led to, we've had M2M, machine-to-machine communication, telemetry, whatever you want to call it, for 70 years. It's not a new way of thinking. But what's changed with IoT? Well, sensor technology has plummeted. The cost of connectivity has plummeted. So basically, the lines have shifted. We've always been able to have one machine talk to another machine and do handshaking and data exchange. But now we can do it over a wide area network. We can do it at scale, and we can do it economically. Suddenly, that opens a whole load of new doors in terms of the business model at the top. So if I can now put something in your hands, or as Amazon has just done, a little button that you can stick to your the wall in the loo. So when you run out of toilet paper, suddenly that starts to become.
You're going to have to get a pretty instantaneous response on the toilet paper.
Delivery times are important in that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But it can also be a hardcore industrial stuff. Attaching sensors on the side of containers that carry bananas around the country, perishable goods around the world, even just to monitor temperature and make adjustments. And if the temperature drifts in a container, then you could do something really simple, like sending someone out to fix it, or that might not be cost effective.
You can just say, and Farmer, I think.
Yeah.
Food,
you could just say,
Farmer.
Based on this algorithm, those bananas now have a lower shelf life than they did. But none of that is possible unless you take advantage of the economics of a lot of what's been going on in the IoT space. So IoT is an interesting example. But you can play lots of other trendy things in there, like big data analytics and all sorts of other things that give you visibility. But I think we should go back to Marcus's question, actually, which I think is the next chart.
But I think the point being, though, that what Dale was saying is you take something like shipping bananas around the world and you think, big deal. How much does it cost to get a banana from wherever it may be, Costa Rica to the UK? The point being is that there is opportunity there that says maybe we can charge more if we could guarantee that those bananas, from the time they left the field to the time they turn up in the supermarket, the temperature variance wasn't more than plus or minus 2 degrees, because they will be super fresh. You could charge for that. So what people are now beginning to do is to say, you know what, how can we differentiate an undifferentiated industry? So you get into this whole notion of industries where the level of service you can offer is actually something that you can begin to charge for, and actually will become the reason why you will actually generate loyalty. So if you take what we call zero switching cost industries like travel, transportation, hospitality, insurance, retail banking, where the cost to you and I to move suppliers is zero. So therefore the question is, why would we stay with a supplier? Why would we always go to Hilton Hotels? Why would we always fly British Airways? Why would we always go to Gap for my jeans rather than Levi's for my jeans? Why do I always stick with a particular mobile phone operator? The biggest difference comes down to the level of service I get, the way they treat me. And it's difficult to put a price on that, but the point being is it's worth real money. And excuse me, what it's all about is how can you therefore differentiate an undifferentiated industry using technology, and that's what so many people are doing with digital, is using it for that differentiation.
I think there was an example I was talking to a client about with building management, where you set a criterion of we will keep the entire office at 21 degrees, which is very warm, but they had to set it at a high level, because they couldn't say, well, 18 is where you need it most of the time, but some rooms you're going to need it 21 and so on. It just had to be a blanket statement.
But see, that's where the technology you flicker any other way. So what you therefore have is a network that's inside the building that starts to monitor who's in the building and who's not in the building. One, you therefore you can secure the access to the building, but as in the morning, the number of people coming into the building goes up, so you will probably want to drive the heating down because more people are in the building. Vice versa, the external temperature. So the point being is the network becomes the building as opposed to the building becomes the network.
Absolutely. So this means talking to each other? Is it straightforward as that? Haven't we been here before?
Yeah, I think so. We have been here before, and it's a perennial problem.
I guess I'm being a bit glib, but I'm seeing so much complexity, so much difficulty in. I mean, just saying we need to engage with the business. It's more complicated than that now, isn't it?
Well, it's more complicated, but also there are some opportunities there, right? So let's think back to how we used to do IT and how a lot of organisations still do IT. Basically, it's forget the ones on the left, provided we do a good enough job for those on the left so they don't sabotage the project by not using whatever it is that you've rolled out or whatever, that's fine. So we've set the bar pretty low historically in terms of dealing with their needs.
Acceptance, user acceptance.
So most things start with a business need. It started with the top. Someone said we need to re-engineer our supply chain or whatever it happens to be. And then IT has responded. So there's been a dialogue constantly between that. And a lot of people have talked about IT business alignment, if you remember those days, going back a few years. But it's quite interesting, actually. I mean, I've poo-pooed the whole BYOD thing, but if you take these kinds of devices, just technology in the consumer space, cloud services that consumers have access to as well, there's a lot more technology awareness on the left-hand side. But the thing that always is interesting for me, we quite often run workshops with people who are trying to sort of resolve these differences. And when you get heads of department from the business in the room, it's really interesting trying to distinguish between when they're talking as a business manager, they're at the top of this triangle, and when they're talking as a user and they're complaining about their iPhone can't do this or whatever. And
it's just like the jailer-prisoner dilemma, you adopt roles.
So you can say this is all really confusing and really complex, but actually if you turn it around, you can say this is actually quite an interesting opportunity, because if you can get people to appreciate that these are all just different perspectives on the use of technology in business, then they're all a lot more technology aware now than they were 10 years ago, certainly. And even over the last few years, I mean, you just look at the rate of change around cloud services and social networks and so on. So you've got a much more open dialogue going on. So the trick is just to keep the dialogue is going to happen anyway, because if you don't serve those needs, these guys come knocking on your door. And if you don't give them what they want as IT, they go knocking on the boss's door.
So this is a lot more what's the term I'm looking for? Granular, maybe, than just talk to the business, which is the phrase that has been trotted out.
No, I think it says there, I think what you need, and we demand it nearly when we run workshops, is that you need both technology people and business people in the room at the same time. Because there has to be this meeting of the minds, as it were, in terms of where are we going, why are we doing this, what do we want to get out of it, and how easy or difficult is it going to be going forward. But it's got to be a collaborative approach. It can't be just, I want this. It just can't be the old, chuck it over the wall, get the IT to do it, beat the crap out of them for 6 months, and then get delivery and move on. I think those days have got to be ended with as quickly as possible.
It's hilariously, I hadn't really thought through how sad a word acceptance is. When we say user acceptance testing, it's just I suppose we're stuck with it. So that's all you get.
We were running a round table recently, and one of the guys, CIO, I think he was a CIO around the table, he said, I've got a secret weapon. He said, it's our rockstar developer. He said, when I'm trying to get something across, either why we should or shouldn't be doing something with the board members, I'll wheel this guy in and he'll listen for a bit and he'll go away and he'll build a prototype. So if we want to take him down a different route, because for legitimate reasons what they were asking for wasn't particularly practical, the developer will go away, mock something up, but mock something up in the knowledge that it can be delivered, and go back and say, well, we can't really do that, but we can do this. How about that? And suddenly now, and so the point I'm trying to make with that is with cloud services, with rapid prototyping, with development tools nowadays, and just changes in delivery models, you can actually show as much as more than you tell when you're trying to sort of get people to meet minds. So they're already familiar with a lot of stuff and you're just trying to sort of line them up. Anyway, it's a way of saying communication, you can either view it as a big problem or you can say it's an opportunity, because you're at least pushing against an open door, and illustrating what you're talking about is a lot easier than it was a while ago. There's not the same need for architecture diagrams and
but do it, show don't tell. Which and I think I'm going to move us on a little bit to this very question, which is around infrastructure and around making it actually work for people. And what you're illustrating there is that there's a lot that can go wrong in the actual practicalities, that you've got to say, look, that can't work, that can work, and actually it's not just about understanding the users, it's getting the users engaged in the technology discussion as well, but through demonstrating it.
So what's your worst nightmare? So something gets sold to a senior business person or some politically strong set of users out in the business, and you think, oh no, this translates to a 50 grand, 3 months, 6 months integration job. And we've all been there. It's it's pretty demoralising. Now you've got to unravel expectations, reset them, or just say no. So why are you in the position of having to do a 50 grand integration project or a 5 million integration project, depending on the scale of your business and the project? often it's because your infrastructure isn't flexible enough for you to do those kind of things without incurring a lot of pain, development work, hardcore integration work, and so on. So if you just turn that around a little bit, and this is a difficult bit because we're talking about infrastructure here. In an ideal world, you want to get your infrastructure into a place where it's inherently a lot more flexible. It's API enabled, it's policy driven, it's soft coded as opposed to hard, and it complies with all
so
the
you're delivering a
standards.
platform.
It's a platform thing.
Yeah.
If you have the right platform, everything becomes a lot easier. I mean, it's what you guys do for a living, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think it's this big question of build and buy. I think that's the difference as well. I mean, in the past, it was always build. Whatever you wanted, you built. And I think now we're in a world where you look at the breakdown of the services and app demands, and you've got to make a decision of what am I going to build and what I'm not going to build. I'm actually going to buy that in because, to be honest, it's not going to change my differentiator. It's going to be a lot easier, a lot faster. As Dale said, I can drive this all through a set of APIs. So the point being is I can actually get something up and running much, much faster because I can buy this piece of infrastructure, as it were, with my credit card. So this whole notion that it's going to be a hybrid environment. It's going to have some of the stuff. If I took, I don't know, take an example. If I take, an app on here that allows me to book an airline ticket. If I went on here and Dale says to me, I need you to fly to corporate headquarters tomorrow, San Francisco. Get yourself, do not ever talk to anybody. Go on here, find yourself a flight. I need you on the ground by 10 o'clock tomorrow. So go on board. So I go on here and I go to an airline. I find the timetable. The timetable tells me there are flights at X, Y, Z. I like the particular time because that means I get on the ground at a certain time. I go on and find out, is there any availability? Yes, there's availability. Is it affordable? Yes. Am I going to pay for it with a credit card? Yes. Am I going to download my boarding pass? Yes. Am I going to choose my seat, my meal, and all this stuff? Yes. Now, just think back through that scenario. The timetable that I go on, is that a differentiator? No. So that's public cloud. Why would you just put it in the public cloud? It's not going to make me a better airline that I don't publish my timetable. So publish your timetable. Make it free to everybody. Now, when I go on to the system that says, are there seats available on a particular flight, that's probably a really old system. Let's be honest. And then maybe the ticketing system is equally. So therefore, I'm probably dealing with, legacy technology, which I've got to integrate. Then I'm going to go on board and say, right, now I need my boarding pass. And that's a different system altogether. And I'm going to pay for it with my credit card, which means I need an encrypted link, 128-bit, all this sort of stuff. So when you think about it, it's like conducting an orchestra. What I need to do then is to say, how am I going to orchestrate and automate this process? So from here, it looks like a single act. And yet behind the scenes, there are all of these systems.
I'm gutted you were making it so simple up until then.
But that's the point. I mean, that's the world we live in. That's the world that HPE lives in. That's the world that every customer lives in. There is no customer that can say, no, we don't have any of that. They all have legacy systems, even if legacy means 2 years old. They all are trying to come to terms with what's in the public cloud, what's in the private cloud, what's managed, what's this, what's that. And that orchestration comes back to actually delivering the experience on here. It's not just a question of having the latest iPhone or the best app. If you don't have the network and you don't have the ability at the back end to deliver the results, then this is all for nothing. Because my children will become frustrated because once 2.7 seconds has gone beyond, their view is this system is really slow and needs to be updated. And that's really what HP is all about.
This does link to a question, which I think you've already answered, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
How do we avoid being sold a digital pup by integrators and resellers who are saying it's all going to be wonderful, it'll all join together, it'll all be perfectly orchestrated?
I think the first thing we sit down with people is what is it you want to get out of this? And what do you not want to get out of it? These things are not going to fix world hunger and all the rest of it instantly. So the question is, set yourself realistic goals.
World hunger's 2.0.
Yeah, as always.
Yeah.
But the point being, I think, is what is it you want to get out of this? Who is it you're trying to serve? What difference are you trying to drive? Because for some organisations, they're well down the digital road. Other organisations are less so. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. You've got to have an environment that is hybrid and flexible and agile in order that you can talk to the guys that are 2 or 3 or 4 years down the digital road, and the guys who are just starting out.
Dale? Well, I agree with you for short to medium term stuff, but I would come at it from the other direction as well and say you don't know what's going to be asked of your infrastructure in 5 years' time. You really don't, and if you think you do, you're probably going to be mistaken. So the way I look at this, it's about infrastructure readiness. That's a nice, simple way of putting it. Is your infrastructure up to people asking it to do really stupid, unexpected things that you never anticipated? And if you think in those terms, so you know, agile is a good word, flexible is a good word, but what does it boil down to? You know, if you've got a bunch of legacy systems that are totally closed, you need to start opening them up. Now, the good news is that if you're using packages or you're using modern cloud services, you know, like Salesforce or whatever, all these, as you upgrade now, these things come API enabled, so they're inherently more integratable and accessible from these things, but also from other back-end systems that might want to do sort of point-to-point in the back-end, you know, horizontal integration. And if you've got well, you will have systems if you're a large organization that have been bespoke developed or, you know, sitting on older platforms. There's lots of technology now that allow you to wrapper those, you know, put an API layer so you can publish services, you know, take a RESTful API approach and have that translated to whatever archaic request system protocol is dealt with behind the scenes. But it's not to do this for the sake of it. I mean, obviously take initial projects and initial requirements as your lead. But when you're doing these things, get away from doing point-to-point integrations and bespoke integrations and say, is this an opportunity for me to now wrapper this thing, plug it into middleware, or is, you know, lots of people struggle to upgrade. What's the business case for upgrading my ERP system? Well, functionally, there may not be a very good case, but in terms of integration, there might be a bloody good case, because suddenly the whole thing now starts to become a lot more friendly.
I wonder if a lot of that also boils down to having the right skills in-house, in terms of knowing how to wrapper a thing, knowing what the latency issues are if you've got things architected in a certain way, and then being able to work around them.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest differences though is understand that infrastructure doesn't mean I have to own it all. And that's I think a mindset change. You don't have to build everything. It's a question of linking into things that allow you to deliver. And I think, as Dale was saying, you know, if it's this trying to predict the unexpected, the fastest way you can respond sometimes is just by buying in a service rather than trying to build it. Because if you're going to build it, you're going to be into 3 months. Minimum. And a lot of people would laugh, I'm sure, when they're watching this broadcast and say 3 months. You know, it's 9 months for us. It's a year for us. Yeah. But I mean, if you're really good at what you do, in 3 months you could have something up and running. But the point being is that if you're going to respond that fast, then you're probably looking about buying something in rather than building something. And that was really the behind the picture we stuffed up here was about this, you know, as we move forward, just as Dale was saying earlier, I think, you know, on the left-hand side, we've been about this whole frictionless deliverability. If we can make the interface between the device and as it were, the infrastructure as frictionless as possible, which means I don't notice it. The best networks are the ones you don't see. I mean, I don't know about in your house, you know, as soon as the network becomes visible, i.e. it goes down, it becomes a point of conversation. If the Wi-Fi is working, no one talks about it. No one comes in every day and says, Dad, great Wi-Fi.
I've always thought that, yeah, when we stop talking about technology, I can retire then.
Yeah, but that's the point, is that, you know, someone once said to me, it should be just like air. You know, it's there, but you can't see it.
Yeah,
so I think we've got quite good at people and interfacing, but as Dale was talking about, you know, as we now move into this world of sensors, being able to sense things, whether it be in our car, or I mean, I got in my car the other day and it tells me how many days to go for a service, and actually tells me where I'm going for the service. It downloads that to my phone for me, and I'm thinking, I don't know, do I want this? Yeah, this is pretty handy. But the point being is those sensors going forward are going to make life safer for people and better for people, but they do require an infrastructure that wasn't built to do that, and that's the sort of thing we're going to have to focus on.
Let's Dale.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a mindset shift that a lot of IT departments need to make, and some of them have already made this, to be fair. And that's to say, we can't control everything that goes on in IT. It might be as simple as the marketing department going out and commissioning a digital agency to build some mobile apps, and then suddenly a request comes through oh, I need to interface this with our customer database or whatever, or pass transactions through to the ERP, whatever it happens to be. And that needs to be dealt with. You can't ignore that, because they're going to go off and they're going to commission that kind of work and are going to be doing that kind of stuff anyway. So the question is, what do you need on the infrastructure side? So my advice would always be, think in terms of the edge is constantly changing. You can't even predict how it's going to change, but also you can't actually control it either. So what you're looking at is trying to think in terms of building a core, an infrastructure, if you like, which is both flexible, open, but also you can take care of a lot of things at the bottom there, security, data protection.
So I was going to say, we've
cetera,
got a question
et
in which asks that directly, so
Yeah.
both of you. For many, going digital is a double-edged sword, business benefit, but exposure to cybercrime. So how do you deal with those issues
I think you need to be
as we start to wrap up?
Yeah, you need to be very, very clear about where to draw the lines. I mean, in many ways, a lot of this is about taking down barriers, but you do need you do need lines of responsibility. So whoever is responsible for looking after security and compliance, for instance, they are the final arbiter in terms of what gets through from the edge into the core, and how exceptions are managed and so on. So a lot of this is as much about policy as it is about technology itself. But I'll just keep going back to the key point, which is you need to aim to have a hardened infrastructure.
There's no digital nirvana, is there?
There
No,
isn't.
and
You
security
get away
can't
with
be
this.
the add-on either. It can't be, let's build it and then we'll bolt security on afterwards. I mean, our approach to that is that security has to be, as it were, weaved in from day one. And I think that's the way, as we're building these new systems, is not to view the fact that we're going to give the customer what they want, then think about the security afterwards. That's a very dangerous position to get into.
So execs need to understand what technology can do for the business, but also understand the realities of things we've just been talking about, service delivery,
Eyes wide
security
open.
and so on. Got to get the guys collaborating, as we said earlier on, remember that triangle. Choose some champion projects, but these are not just things that you do to prove a concept. They're your starting point to start to evolve the infrastructure in the direction you need to take it, to make it more robust and agile. And you've got to see things through. I mean, if your objective is transformation, whether it's little transformation or big transformation, you've got to see this through.
It's like going to the gym, isn't it? You can't just kind of go once and go, well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We try. It's no harm in trying, but anyway.
And the old cliche of the only constant is change is important. But the point about our last one is preparing for change, or my phrase is you've got to be change ready. And that's in terms of policy, responsibilities, awareness, skills, you mentioned. But
does this go
big
back
time
to more
infrastructure.
ancient wisdom, like be the change and all that kind of stuff? So.
I think it's just endemic now. I just don't think, when we sort of think of change as if something that came and then went, and then you weren't changing for a while, I think that's long gone. I think now it's continuous innovation, it's continuous change, it's fail fast, move on. And that's the way it's going to be. As far as we can see, for 10 years in the future now, that's it. That's the way business, unfortunately, or fortunately, will have to behave, as it were.
keeps
Thank
it all
you.
interesting.
So it's a journey, you're on it, get on it, and as you can see here, we've got a very snappily titled bit.ly link for you to link to, reg.cx/2 small n capital U if you want more insights to guide your digital journey. Hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Thank you very much for your questions. If you have any more, then please let us know and we'll endeavour to get back to you directly. Thank you. See you next time.